Embark on an epic adventure using problem solving and strategy to explore an undiscovered island. Along the way, you'll be faced with tough decisions and threatening perils. But worry not, because I'm here to teach you how to play Isla. To set up for a multiplayer game of Isla, you need to give each player a map sheet, 5 exhaustion tokens that go underneath the matching colour die on the bottom of the map sheet. They will need 11 map tokens that have species on them and some other things as well, which we'll get into later. They will need a meeple that tells them where their explorer is. They start on the boat space, it's the bottom leftmost space. And then you set up your map tokens by flipping them all face down, giving them a bit of a mix up, and then placing them as randomly as you can on the highlighted spaces on the map. Once you've done this, you can flip them all face up. And then before the game begins, each player may decide, if they want to switch any 2 tokens with each other. So for example, I might want to switch these 2 like this. You'll also want to put the dice in reach of all players, the threat card deck in reach of all players as well, and then the research card deck you'll want to put in reach of all players, and then draw the first 4 cards in a line. And then decide a first player and give them the first player card. Each player will also need their own pencil. Now we are set up to begin a game of Isla. Isla uses a dice exhaustion mechanic to move around the island. The way this works is you have 5 dice icons at the bottom of the map sheet, each with an exhaustion token on them. These correspond to the 5 dice in the dice pool. To exhaust a die means to slide the exhaustion token over the die icon. This symbolizes that you can no longer use that die. To refresh a die, you slide the exhaustion token down, revealing the die icon again. We'll talk more about this mechanic in the explore part of the video. The island is made up of blocks with different terrains, and these terrains may be referenced by threat cards. The terrain types are mountain, jungle, swamp, beach, and cliff. These terrains can be seen in the rulebook, and they also each have a different style on the map. In Isla, you'll be moving around this map, exploring the island, drawing your path, with the aim of collecting these species tokens and researching the species that you find. Isla is played in a series of rounds and ends when all players have either exited the island or got lost on the island. A round is split into various phases, starting with the planning phase. During the planning phase, players will declare what they'll be doing for this round, or in context of the game, during this day. The options each player has is to explore, rest, or research, and we'll be getting into those 3 actions in just a bit. Planning is done in player order, so it's important to pay attention to what other people choose, as it may impact your decision. Once everyone has declared what they want to do, we move on to the dice rolling phase. The first player will pick up all 5 dice and roll them so that they're visible to all players. If at this point any 1s are rolled, the first player will need to resolve a threat card. To do this, the first player takes 1 card from the threat deck, regardless of how many 1s were rolled, flips it and reads it out loud to the rest of the group. Then they action the action at the bottom of the card. For example, this one here says to exhaust your D8 die. Throughout the game, you'll keep a tally of threat cards you've received and add these to the points at the end of the game. Once all threats are resolved, if any, we move on to the rest phase. In this phase, any players that chose to rest during the planning phase will now get their chance to rest. To resolve a rest, a player looks at their exhaustion tokens and refreshes the leftmost exhausted die. Then that player crosses off their rest space on the map sheet. If you have collected your second rest token, you can instead just flip the token over. Once all players that chose to rest have rested, we move on to the explore phase. In this phase, anyone who chose to explore during the planning phase will be able to move around the map. This phase is done simultaneously, so all players can move at the same time. Players will then choose 1 die from the dice pool that have been previously rolled, exhaust that die on their map sheet, and then move the number of spaces that is shown on the die's face. For example, I've picked this D8, I've exhausted the D8 on my map sheet, and now I get to move 3 spaces. Optionally, players may discard a research card to add the points value to their movement this round. A player's explorer can move orthogonally but never diagonally, and can never move into a space that they've already drawn in. To move, you draw your line equal to the number of spaces you're moving, and then place your explorer at the end of that line. When exploring, a player must move their explorer the full amount equal to the value of the die they have chosen. Whenever you land on or pass through a space with a token on it, if it is a species token, you can pick it up and put it to the side of your map to use later for research. If it is a rest token, you can pick it up and put it next to your rest space on your map sheet, and that allows you to take an extra rest turn later in the game. If it is the boulder token, the token with the big X, you're not allowed to move into it or through it at any point in the game. Throughout the island, you'll notice multiple dice symbols that match the ones that you exhaust and refresh. Whenever you move onto or through one of these symbols, you get to refresh the corresponding die. For example, if I was to move over this yellow D8, I would be able to refresh the D8 die on the bottom of the map sheet. Well-timed dice refreshes are crucial to exploring as much of the island as you can and to reach the end of the island. If an explorer makes it to the end of the island, their final explore action will see them come off onto the escape track. To do this, you move as usual, counting down the spaces of the escape track, ending up on a final scoring space. If your final move was to take you past the last space of the escape track, instead you stay at that last space. Once all players that chose to explore have moved, we move on to the research phase. The research phase is conducted in player order, and each player that chose to explore this round will get a chance to trade in their tokens for a research card on display. When researching a card, you select one of the cards from the face-up river, and you pay its cost in species token. You can then place the tokens on top of the card to keep them nice and neat. After taking a card, you immediately replenish the river before the next person researches. Once all players who have chosen to research this round have finished, you also take away the last card in the research river, discard it, and then draw a new card next to the deck. This means that the research river will always be refreshing even if nobody decides to research. Once everybody has researched, you prepare for the next round by passing the first player card to the player on the left. Some players may see their explorer get lost on the island. This happens if you cannot take either a rest, explore, or research action. You cannot take a rest action if you don't have any available slots. You cannot explore if all of your dice have been exhausted, or if an explorer cannot move into an adjacent space. Remember, you cannot move into a space you have already drawn in, and you cannot research if you don't have the tokens to do so. In this event, you'll no longer be able to take part in the round, but you still get to score up your points. Once each player has either exited the island or got lost on the island, the game will end and we'll score up the points. The scoring is listed on the bottom right of the match sheet and consists of points for being first out. The first player to exit the island gets 5 points. The second person gets 3 points. If 2 players exit on the same round, they both get the full amount of points. For example, if 2 players both exited first on the same round, they would both get 5 points. You also get points for your research cards, so just add the total up. Some threat cards may also have positive or minus points on them, so you add those. Any dice that have not been exhausted at the end of the game, you get to add their points. The value of each die is listed on the exhaustion token. If your explorer exited the island, you also get to add the number that they landed on the escape track. Your tally of threat cards also go towards your final score. And finally, you minus 1 point for every space you did not visit on the island. To do this, you remove all tokens from the map and count every space that you have not drawn on. Now all that's left to do is sum up those points and you get your final score. The player with the highest score wins. Now you know how to play, you're ready to explore Isla. And if you get stuck, there's a handy quick reference on the back of the rules.